You are listening to the Information Security Announcement Podcast, episode 37, originally released on December 10th, 2020. As always, I'm your host, Josh Amishav. Today, Jenny Radcliffe joins us to talk about social engineering. Jenny is a burglar for hire. She's essentially a professional ethical con artist. She's an expert in nonverbal communication, deception, and persuasion techniques. She's hired to test physical security measures. Jenny has spent her career mastering how to exploit the human element to access buildings and sensitive information. My three main takeaways from our conversation were: 1, which influence factors are most useful in specific situations like in-person social engineering versus phishing emails. 2, reading microexpressions in context and understanding their limitations. And 3, how to protect yourself against social engineering attacks. You enjoyed those 3 things plus a bunch of other tips along the way. Direct support for this podcast comes from BreachSense. Stolen credentials are one of the most common methods used to hack into a company's network. BreachSense gives you visibility into third-party data breaches which include your company's credentials. This enables your security team to reset stolen passwords before they're used to access your sensitive data. Head on over to breachsense.io/contact to start your free 7-day trial. And now, here's my conversation with Jenny. Jenny Radcliffe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. Great to be here.
Can you tell us a bit about who you are and what do you do?
Sure. So I'm a social engineer, specialised in physical infiltrations and in the psychology of social engineering. So not really a technical person, don't really use tech personally, although I do put teams together. We do have crews together. It depends on the job, where obviously we would use a lot of technology and would use more technical hackers than me. But no, so my main areas of expertise are breaking and entering, physical infiltration, and the psychology of the whole thing. So that's what I do. Yeah, and that's what I'm, I guess, known for.
Okay, so what are the easiest or hardest personality types to manipulate to social engineer?
So it doesn't really work that way, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I mean, everybody has levers, everyone has buttons that can be pressed. And actually, a lot of the time, people, I mean, the answer people think would be, there's people who may be naive or lonely. If you look at something like romance scams and romance fraud, that's someone who's really looking for companionship. They might be a bit lonely. That seems like an easier thing to do than, say, security professional, right? But it doesn't work that way. What happens is everyone has things that they move towards and things that they sort of, if you like, mentally run away from. So we all have a push and a pull. And once you've identified what that is, once you've identified that weakness, and I say weakness, it's a personality trait, right? What makes malicious social engineering so cruel is that they see human nature as a weakness, and that's what makes criminals so awful. But once you've identified what those things are, then everybody's vulnerable, and no one is particularly more difficult or less difficult than anyone else, really. Not once you get to the real nuts and bolts of what makes up someone's psychology.
Okay, so beyond the physical reconnaissance done on a target, what kind of OSINT research do you focus on before an engagement?
So we would be very thorough, and I sort of don't run a crew the same way a lot of people do. I would be looking, yes, of course, we'd look at the building, we'd look at entrance and access points, and in fact, used to spend an awful lot of time doing surveillance, doing that. We need to spend less time now because we can do a lot of it online. But if we're not in the middle of COVID, of course. But I'm interested in the culture of the company, the way that people behave in groups. I'm interested in where the power lies within a business. So power within an organization is not necessarily down to title. Power within organizations, power within groups of people comes from things like charisma, knowledge, connections. There's all these different types. And I'm interested really where that is, because that's really where the knowledge lies, where the access lies, and where we can sort of push people along a process once we're inside. So I would be very granular. So it'd be everything from the building itself, the company itself, the leadership. How do people respond to leadership? Is it a charismatic leader? Someone everybody knows, like maybe Richard Branson, or I used to work for GE, so I worked for GE in the days when Jack Welch was in charge, and he was like God if you worked in GE, So is it from a leader? Is it from a single leader, or is it more widely spread? Is it more sort of networked? And we look at everything, how people celebrate when things go right, when someone's promoted, when they win a big contract, where do they go? Where do they drink? How do they reward success? And also how they punish people and what people do to commiserate and to support each other. And so that by the time that we get into that building, I would know that culture really well, probably better than a lot of people who work there and don't question it, don't really think about, because you don't think about where you work particularly. And we would know all of those things. And particularly what we look for is employees who hack the company and the building themselves. So people who get past security because it's quicker to go for a cigarette break or to nip to the store and buy sodas or whatever it is. And we would know all the shortcuts that they take, as many as we could observe anyway, before we even go in. So that once we're in there, I can have a good language tricks and linguistic tricks. I would know things. I would sound familiar with the company, with the people. I would understand the way to kind of structure a conversation so that it fitted with the culture of the company. And so that, the level of OSINT we do is very granular, and it makes the job, it makes us expensive, makes me expensive as a consultant, but we do that level of detail because it's necessary in the level of jobs that come into the business. If it's a smaller company, we do it anyway just because it's good practice. But so a lot of OSINT, I'd say 70% of the job is done before we even go near the building.
Great. So what are the factors of influence that you use most often?
Factors of influence, do you mean?
Like, I mean, if you're looking at like Cialdini's book, right? So I think it's got like 7 factors. So what are the ones you find the most effective in social engineering?
So again, it depends on the...
It doesn't work that way.
Well, the thing is, it does work that... No, it does, right? But like, it depends on the context, right? So if you're looking at something like Cialdini, authority, I already mentioned authority, right? So authority will work very well if it's a company with a defined hierarchy, if you're in a particular national culture that really appreciates something like title. So somewhere like Japan, the use of authority employees would work very well. In an emergency situation, so if you create a distraction like a fire alarm going off or something like that, then authority employees work well there. But what happens more widely is the principle of life.
Can you just for the authority, let's say the fire alarm, can you just explain that? Like, what's the example? So there's an authority, there's a fire alarm, and then how do you use the titles that you know about in order to further the social engineering?
So if you can imagine from a leadership perspective, right, it's not very common anymore for people to say that being told what to do is the best style of leadership, right? So we have a more consultative approach, a more integrative approach to leadership. So, we involve people in decisions, and we get feedback, we take feedback. So all those things. The one situation where people like to be told, in fact, not the one situation, but the most obvious situation where people like to be told what to do and want to be told what to do, is in a situation of emergency. All right. So when there's confusion, there's panic, and there's cognitive dissonance in people's brain, and we'd introduce this in phishing emails and things as well. But let's say in a live engagement, if a fire alarm goes off or there's some incident within the building where the building needs to be evacuated, if you are then in the high-vis vest and the clipboard and you then behave as if you know what you're doing, okay, then people will respond very well to that in those circumstances because they expect to be told what to do, right? And they want to be told, leave now, go by that door, don't pick up your bag, don't turn off your laptop, you need to leave. So it depends on the context, you see.
Got it. Okay. So back to the other question in terms of the other factors of influence that are useful. Mm-hmm. What are the other, from Cialdini's influence factors, which ones do you find useful or helpful?
So as I say, in the context of whatever it is, so they are used in different ways. So that one would be used in that circumstance, or just if the company was very hierarchical and people were told what to do, you might use authority that way. I think what a lot of the time works very well is the principle of liking. So it's hard to say no to someone you like. And the way that we decide whether we like someone is often familiarity and trust, right? So if you can be someone who can build rapport very quickly with someone, let them know that you're similar to them, show empathy for their situation, then that principle works very well when you're actually inside to build on a physical engagement. So let me give you an example. Let's imagine you're on a physical engagement and someone stops you and asks for a pass or whatever, and you show them your little sort of a spoofed pass, and then it's like, I'm sorry about this, I had to stop someone myself last week in site X. It's just all these rules drive me mad. It makes you feel bad. stopping someone. I know, don't worry. And it's that kind of easy conversation, the idea that I know you feel a bit awkward asking me, or it's a difficult thing that we all have to do now, isn't it? We all have to sort of stop people. And it's that principle of liking. We like people who are similar to us. We like people we even hire people who we find similar. It's something called the harmony principle. So when you first meet someone, and I find this all the time, particularly if I go out to the States, and people will say in America, oh, where's your accent? You're British. The first thing they'll say is you're British. Never English, by the way, always British. So I say yes. And then they say, oh, is your accent? I often get asked, they say to me, are you Scotch? And I go, no. Irish? No. Oh, I say I'm from Liverpool. Oh, Liverpool, right? The Beatles, the soccer. And now they feel comfortable because there's a point of reference that they know, right? And once you have established that harmony principle, that point of reference, you can work on that point of reference and people feel very comfortable and they like you more. And if someone likes you, it's hard to say no to you. And so the liking principle within a building it works very well. And I mean that, the others work as well. It just depends on the circumstance. Commitment and consistency works very well with phishing emails, because once people commit to something and say that, it's hard for them to say, I was wrong. It's hard for them to say, particularly if they've put something in writing or they've told people. And again, romance scams come into this one. It's hard then to say you were wrong. You want to be consistent with what you've said before. It even explains why people vote for certain politicians, and then it's clear that they've made a mistake. And I'm not just talking, I'm talking about in lots of different countries. It's clear that they've made a mistake. It's clear that that person isn't who they said they were. But because they've gone on the record to say that they like that person, they support that person, very hard to pull back on that. And of course, that can be used by a hacker as well.
If you're the first time in a building, or even first couple times, how can you use liking if you don't have the repetitions of knowing a person? How do you use liking?
Well, because you find something in common with them, even if it's only the time of day. It's late, I'm tired, or it's some feature of the building. I've had to walk around. You find something in common, and you find something that they will be experiencing, and then you express empathy with that.
Got it. Okay, let's talk a bit about microexpressions. How accurate are they in terms of reading another person's thoughts, or if they're lying, or how accurate can they be used?
So the thing about a microfacial expression, okay, is that this is something that Dr. Paul Ekman, championed and did all the research and wrote a lot of books on, and then it was picked up by lots of other researchers as well. And even though people constantly try and disprove his research, nothing ever really holds up when it's challenged. And so what microexpressions say is that when there's an emotional event in the brain, that the face moves in a particular way. So the muscles of the face move in a particular way if a person is genuinely happy, if a person is genuinely sad. And there are 7 emotions that the face shows. And there's variations on that theme, right? So like, for example, there's like 16 different types of smile, and they use different types of muscles. But generally speaking, because the microfacial expression is quick, because it uses specific muscles, and because it's very hard to do that, you can't really do it. So to control those muscles is a very particular skill. We can't really do it on demand. And also it happens opaque to consciousness. So what we mean by that is you experience the event in the brain, the face makes the expression fleetingly, half a second, and then it's gone. And so the theory is like that is very difficult to fake. And so if you can read those expressions, then you can tell what emotion someone has experienced, okay, but not why. And that is the key thing, is that all you are doing is collecting data. And you have to be very careful making a judgment as to why someone has pulled a sad expression, because we tend to make a correlation and make assumptions. Okay, so they're sad because, well, we don't know that, right? We don't know what someone's emotional inner life is like. So that said, I have to say that because it always sounds like with microexpressions, it's sort of the Aladdin's cave, right? Because if you can read that, you can tell what someone has just experienced emotionally in the brain.
Is the manifestation of each of those expressions identical among people?
Yeah, because we have the same anatomy. Because basically what you're doing, and to be honest with you, Josh, it's true with a lot of the things. You asked me at the beginning about profiling people and different personalities. Mm-hmm. The most important thing to know when we're really looking and working with people is that everyone is exactly the same in some ways and then is completely different in other ways. And what we're really doing with microfacial expressions is getting down really to a psychophysiological level. So you're really getting down to someone's actual anatomy, someone's amygdala, the things that we all have. If you are Homo sapiens and you experience joy, then your face will move in a certain way. It's kind of slightly different in children because you're still growing and your sort of facial muscles don't fix until you're a little bit older. But there's even systems to gauge it in apes and even in horses now, I believe, although I can't really get with that. But anyway, but because it would be great. Like that was really where a lot of it came from. It came from Paul Ekman's tutor when he was at UCLA. He wanted to read horse racing expressions, so he used to be able to predict the winner of each horse race, would you believe, by looking at its face.
Wow.
And he was really rich because of it. Crackers, absolute crackers by the sound of it as well, but amazing genius. Anyway, so what I would say is, so you can see it, all right? But it's a very difficult thing to do tactically. So when you're if I'm interviewing someone, I will absolutely be looking for those micro expressions. If I'm talking with someone, now I've learned them, I see them, but you have to be sure to get it right. So when we do exams and things in it, it's a very granular thing, and you're doing you'd analyze a film. And if the film was 3 minutes long, I think it took us 2 hours to analyze. So it's a really particular thing. Wow. And because it's so easy to make those correlations from what you see, you have to be very careful about what you're doing because you can make the wrong decision. Now, particularly in security, and I kind of sort of touched on it before, but a lot of the infiltration jobs that I get, certainly latterly, I say latterly, it was all along, it's not been straightforward. This is an office, can you test whether or not our people are adhering to operational procedure? These will be high security things, or there'll be an issue of some sort that's really quite important. So you can't afford to make the wrong judgment call based on the way someone frowns, right? So what it is it's part of a story. It's part of the general assessment of somebody that you can add to your own experience and to what's happening on the ground to give you a better judgment call on what that person's actually experiencing, doing, trying to achieve. And so if you look at it in terms of deception, we always say in the business, there's no Pinocchio's nose, there's no single expression or gesture that says this person is lying, all right? What you have to do is you have to watch someone for as long as you can so that you can understand their baseline state, the state that they're in when they're not under stress, they have no reason to lie to you, and they're at ease. Because some people have got a nervous energy all the time and they move a lot all the time. Other people are very relaxed, and they never seem to move. And what you're looking for is a change to the norm that indicates a cognitive event. So that indicates something has gone on in the brain for that person. And now you have to use all the other data that you can collect, which is everything from their gait, their voice, their non-verbal utterances, something we call response latency. So the time it takes between being asked a question and the response to that question, does that get longer? We're looking at so many different things. And when I'm looking for deception on an interview, I would work across 19 different vectors. So 19 different things that I'd be looking to assess before I would give you an assessment as to how truthful I think that person is being. So it's useful, and to a point, once you learn that stuff, you sort of walk between the raindrops. It puts everyone who learns things like that and learns really things about body language and the way the body reacts to stress. I mean, that means that you can put someone under intense stress or you can relieve them of stress. That gives you kind of a power and a control of a situation. But to be really good at it, you need time and you need practice, because when you're tactically engaging with people, a million things can happen. So it's not as simple as watching expressions, but the truth is, if you learn that stuff and you learn a bit about body language, you are much better with people. And if you're good with people, then you become a good or a better social engineer.
Do language patterns change under stress as well?
Yes. And people have Do you know that, I don't know if this is what we're supposed to refer to as, but do you ever meet someone and they have like sort of a tick, if you like, a nervous tick in their face? You know, a lot of people, if you look at, for example, at the actress Gillian Anderson, she kind of flutters her left eye when she's acting that she's under stress or she's processing something. She sort of blinks just one eye very slightly. And people do these things physically when they're under stress. Okay, so what happens is with stress is that the brain, it's kind of like a computer with too many programs running. All right, it slows everything down, and one of the first things that the brain does is says, "Oh, cognitive load. Let's stop doing anything that's unnecessary." And so one of the first things it does, for example, is it kicks out your fine motor skills. So we stop writing or anything like that. We kind of get still. Although conversely, if you go a little bit further along, we can get more agitated, but it depends on the individual. So we have these little things that we do physically when we're under stress. Everyone's is different, but there are a few that are quite common. But the same things happen to language. And it happens to language when we're lying, and it happens to language when we're stressed, because lying is a stressful thing for the body and for our kind of psychology to manage. And so you'll see people will, like I say, they'll take longer to answer a question. There might be more non-verbal utterances, so sort of breaths, ums and ahs, repetition. And so when you're interrogating, I mean, if you're interrogating someone, you're looking for things like repeating a question verbatim, because that just buys them time. You're looking for things like dodging questions, verbal dodges, verbal diversions. And all of those things give you a picture of what's going on with that individual. But none of them are definitive or particularly of any use until you observe someone for quite a while when they're sort of not under that stressful situation. And that's why, honestly, teaching people those things is great if you want to get to know people better. But I think it's sold a bit falsely that, like, once you learn microexpressions, that you can tell when someone's lying or you can tell when someone's afraid. You can, to a point, but there's so much more to it than that. People are so much more nuanced than what our basic physiology gives away. And so it's things like that make the job so tailored, if you like.
Well, what's the oddest or most interesting thing you've come across in an engagement?
I get asked this all the time, and I suppose it depends. Like this, it always depends, but it depends on what way odd. I mean, there was times when I've been in buildings that were empty at night, and I know they were empty because they've been emptied for me, so I can walk around them. Make of that what you will. And then I've heard noises and glasses smashing and things in the dark. And I've done a lot of kind of sort of high level, if you like, security engagements where there's weird. I mean, I suppose one of the weirdest things was I was in a building in Europe and I was quite high up, and I got locked in an office. So I got in and done everything I used to do, just couldn't get out again. Stupidly left the door closed behind me. And I could have spent hours trying to pick locks and things, but I always think that I love lock sport, but I'm, it's not practical on the job most of the time, I'll be honest. And anyway, it was easy for me to sort of get out of a window and head to the fire escape. I was high up, but there were big, thick windowsills. It wasn't particularly dangerous. I mean, it was high up, but it wasn't a narrow windowsill. And as I was walking to the fire escape, along the outside of the building at like 5 a.m. I looked in a room, there was another crew getting into a filing cabinet sort of safe in an office. And then I saw the police turn up and everything. So the police turn up and go in, and I'm going out, and I went out down the fire escape. And I always think, were they criminals? Was I pretending to be a burglar and actually came across burglars? Or did they put two crews in and they got caught? They didn't get the get out of jail free card out or whatever. I always wonder what went on in that one. But there's always weird things. I mean, it's a strange state of affairs to be inside of a building when you shouldn't be, and you're hyper aware of what's going on, or you should be. You should be focused on getting out. So you should be focused on your objectives, getting them done, getting out. None of this sort of showboating and showing off. And I've spoken about this a lot, but that is really fatal. And I would never work with someone who I thought would do that. So, having said that, the job lends itself to a certain amount of theatre. So there's things that you can do. So I leave little octopuses. I have little silver octopuses, and I leave them on the client's desk and things like that, just to show that I've been there, because it's a bit more interesting than a business card, stuff like that. But you should be on hyper alert. And the thing is, is that if you are in the correct state of mind, you will notice the weird and the wonderful everywhere you go anyway. People are strange, weird, wonderful. And even when I'm not doing a physical infill, even when I'm there to train people, or I'm there to do interviews, or to look at something like a corporate investigation case, I always spot weird sorry, I swore. But I do, because I'm looking around, because people are weird in the most wonderful way. So you see things that go on.
So, speaking of getting caught, have a couple of years ago there was the Coldfire fiasco where they had a couple pen testers, physical pen testers, who got caught.
Yep.
What's changed in terms of your in your testing, or in what's changed since the Coldfire story?
See, I mean, I felt really, I felt a lot of empathy for those guys, and I could see how that could have happened. And it got a lot of sort of public.
I mean, they had their get out of jail free card, so like, what more can you do beyond that?
Well, they came across someone who did not want to be the person who'd been fooled by hackers, I think, and
Yes.
how do you account for that sheriff?
Exactly.
Not going along with the assessment. I mean, they were unlucky that way, I think. That could have been any one of us, really.
So is there anything to change, or it just that's part of the job?
I don't think. I mean, I didn't do anything differently as a result of it.
Okay.
Because I don't think it was something that they could have. I mean, that was what I was sort of getting at. I don't think it was something that was down to them, or the fact that they'd left something. There wasn't a gap in their preparation or anything like that, really. I mean, they did a few things that wasn't specifically said. I mean, what I always think about that incident is its scope. It's always the scope of what you do has to be very carefully written, either to be as vague as possible so you can do whatever you like, or very, very along tram lines, very specific, so that you know what you can and can't do. But I didn't change the way I operated, really, because we operate with guidelines. We make sure the scope's in with the client, and I always we tend to go for a vague target, or to be something specific, but like everything around it be very vague. So I say we won't break any laws, we will not willfully damage any physical infrastructure of the building. So in other words, we won't blow something up. We won't kind of like, if we're going to crowbar a door, say, as opposed to pick a lock, it'll be minimal cost, and so I'm not gonna break the whole door, but like we might bust the lock type thing. So it's very specific as to the extent to which we're going to go, and we also say we won't put any of our crew in any danger as well. So we would say something like that, but other than that, we didn't change it, because I don't think they particularly did anything wrong. Maybe they went, the scope was a bit off and they weren't expecting it. I honestly think they came across someone who just was embarrassed, probably, and just stuck to his guns and was stubborn about it. But it wasn't. I don't think it was their error, really.
Okay, what's your job going to look like in 10 years?
Well, hopefully my job in 10 years will be sitting at the end of a bar, boring everyone to death about the
physical pen testing.
Yeah. I mean, really, the physical side of things is, for me anyway, it's winding up. I still do a few every year, not this year. I was offered a lot of money to do some jobs this year, but it just didn't seem like the right thing to do in the middle of the pandemic. But it's I always say, not young person's game, but it kind of is. You've got to be physically very fit, because you're moving all the time, and particularly for my style and my sort of signature moves, you have to be physically quite strong and agile, because we were always like, I was always getting access from rooftops and things like that, and I just haven't got that physicality anymore. I'm old now, so I kind of, it's more training people to do it, and training younger, fitter souls. And what I love about that side of it is the way that they look at things completely differently, and they see things completely differently. Now, having said all that, the psychology of the job is always evolving, and it evolves with our general, the zeitgeist of everyone being online, and then the pandemic, and then this like fake news. There's always new psychology to work with and to understand, to help keep people safe, from sort of the criminal narrative, if you like. So there's always that's still ongoing, and that's a really great part of the job. And there will always be a demand for people who can do physical infiltrations and get in and get out and leave without detection at all, and without report, if you like. There will always be that in the world, because there's always times when someone needs to go in and get something or take a photograph of something and get out again without being detected. And I think that's something, there are certain jobs that I would put myself on rather than someone else.
Cool. So you touched a bit about the defensive side. How can people protect themselves from being manipulated?
The advice I give to security professionals is the same advice that I would give to general public and to, like, someone's grandma, which is emotional content is bad, right? If somebody heightens your emotions, your logic is no longer in play, all right? And people still do not realize that applies to them. So we're not just talking about getting an email that says, you broke the speed limit and you have to pay, a couple of $100 by Tuesday, or otherwise it goes up more and you have to go to court. It's not just that type of thing. There's this terrible arrogance in the security community. And we all think that we think we would spot this. We would spot if we were being socially engineered. We don't. I watch conversations go down on social media amongst the community, and people are being socially engineered all over the place. Why? Because people are appealing to what people will respond to, and it's that you have to look out for. If you cannot let yourself be manipulated with emotional content. I think the problem is people are generally good and want to help, and particularly security folks, they want to help other people. We know that there's a certain amount of knowledge that we hold, particularly sort of technical people, that is important for people to protect them from criminals. And so it's easy to appeal to that tendency, and whilst we are not critical of ourselves as an industry, and we drink the Kool-Aid, and we run after there's this phrase, we run to the bullets, and that's what the security industry does a lot of the time. They run to the bullets. They don't think, well, why would that what if that person was not a good person? What would that project really signify? What would that post mean? People don't do enough of it, and until we do that, the advice is still the same. It's, if you're if you're angry, if you're indignant on someone's behalf, if all your kind of defensive indignation comes up because someone's a victim of something, really think hard about, is that true? Is that real? And that's the advice, because it's the minute someone mentions money, the minute someone gets you to try and take action on something, they're all big flags as well. But for the industry, it's emotional content. We are still very open to manipulation that way.
Very interesting. All right, to wrap up, who are the people you learn from and look up to in the social engineering field?
So you had one of the people I look up to the most on the show. So Tracy Mayleave is honestly one of the nicest people in the business, and not just nice, she is effective and promotes sort of elevates other people as well. So I look up to Tracy in terms of, I wish
I had her on last week.
Yeah, because I wish I could be that good a person in my career, and have that kind of lovely view of people that she has. She always sees the best in people, and I love that about Tracy. So I look up to Tracy. In terms of social engineers, Richard DeVere from the Anti-Social Engineer over in the UK is one of the best technical hackers I've ever known, and he's brilliant. Trainer and a great guy, and so he's an excellent social engineer. And Joe Gray in the States has just been a good friend to me, and somebody who really has your back. If you're working on something with Joe, that he'll be very thorough, he'll cover everything, and generally just be someone who will get the job done. So I'd always would say that as well. So I'd say Richard, I'd say Joe. In terms of social engineering, they'd be the people I'd really look to.
Are there any books that you would recommend, or is that something you can't learn from a book?
You can learn some stuff from books. You can learn. Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman is a great book about the way the brain works and the way our cognitive bias kind of cancels out some of our logic, and that's a really good place to start. And then Eckermann's books, Emotions Revealed, is really good, as is a guy called Dr. Matsumoto, David Matsumoto's book, which the name of it escapes me, but it's his first hit on Amazon. And his book about body language and everything is excellent, because he did work with Ekman, then he kind of branched off and carried on a different branch of research. And him and a guy called Mark Frank are excellent. Mark Frank's got a course on Audible, the great courses, and that's nonverbal communication, and that's a superb course on that. And then I would go for anything that really is about abnormal psychology and kind of looking at you mentioned Cialdini. Cialdini's books are good, but what you want to do is kind of go down, try and find a rabbit hole to go down and get good at one particular thing. So one of the things that I do a lot of research on and look into is narcissism, and particularly sociopathy in conjunction with narcissism, because what we find is that a lot of the criminals that we look at and a lot of the malicious social engineers, effectively it's linked to narcissism and attention as well as financial reward. So like I wanted to look at that, so I look at every article and every book about that, and that to me is as useful as recommending 15 general books. So I would try and go down a niche at first.
So specialize.
Yeah. That's what
Excellent.
I would say.
All right, where can people find you on the web?
So my website is really the corporate one, and that's humanfactorsecurity.co.uk. But we do have the podcast, YouTube channel, all under the same name, and Twitter as well. So you find me under the moniker The People Hacker. You'll see the blue brain. So the blue brain is the logo of the company, and it's every time I post or anything, my little avatars and everything, they all have this little blue brain. So if you follow the blue brain, you'll find me. But I'm not funnily enough, I'm not difficult to find, which is ironic, really.
Great. All right. Thanks so much for coming on.
No worries. Thanks, Josh.
All right, that's it for today. If you have any comments or questions, please tweet at me at Jamus, Jamusc. And if you got value from this episode, then please share it with a friend. See y'all next week.